thrilled to say we're continuing this conversation with one of the great leaders in the United States Congress. His name is Scott Perry. He represents the people of the 10th District of Pennsylvania and is the chairman of the incredibly important House Freedom Caucus. He brings to bear the experience of an actual combat veteran of the United States Army, a brigadier general, now retired from its National Guard. And we're delighted always to have a chance to catch up with him about, well, matters of great importance to our world. And I'd like to turn to another one, Congressman. The Biden administration seems absolutely determined to conclude a deal with Iran. No matter how ignominious is the treatment that they've been receiving at the hands of the mullahs, how terrible the terms are in terms of our national interest, and how, well, completely improbable is the idea that we're actually going to have some new piece of paper prevent the Iranians from realizing their long-standing objective to get the most dangerous weapons in the world, namely nuclear arms. What's your take on what's happening, and whether Congress is going to be able and or willing to interpose objections to what seems to be an absolutely harebrained idea?
Well, Frank, thanks so much for the question. I don't know. Unfortunately, people are so busy in their lives, they don't probably watch this happening. But we're literally told they're very close to a deal. And when I say they, I'm talking the United States and Iran. So let's break this down. I would break it down into three pieces this way. First of all, President Biden is incompetent and he's unqualified to make any such agreement. Number two, Iran should not be trusted to abide by any such agreement based on their past. And then number three, that any such agreement should be in the form of a treaty, not some agreement that is non-binding, but somehow yet the America binds itself to and Iran doesn't bother following. So let's start with number one. President Biden is not qualified or competent to make this agreement. Your listeners, your watchers, your readers all need to know that, first of all, America is not negotiating. It's actually the Russians negotiating on our behalf.
What's wrong with that picture?
Because Iran, who calls us the... Well, that's exactly right. While at this moment, Russia is invading Ukraine, while Russia also supports Iran militarily, they're negotiating allegedly on our behalf. And I just wonder, so we have essentially two terrorist nations negotiating with each other, and we're supposed to think that we're going to get something good out of it. Right. So that's number one. Biden's just completely incompetent in this. We saw the withdrawal from Afghanistan. We saw how he's actually supported Iran with the lifting of sanctions and literally considering paying Iran billions of dollars and absolving the members of the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the Quds Force, of their crimes against humanity, and certainly their crimes on the battlefield against American citizens in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then of course their spread of terrorism around the globe, whether it's through the Houthis or Hezbollah or Hamas. Right. And so Joe Biden's not qualified. So that's number one. Number two, Iran. You can't trust them. They never abided by the first agreement. And by the way, even the Obama administration said that was a non-binding agreement, neither country actually signed it. And but even so, Iran never abided by it. They were still enriching at Fordow, which was prohibited for 15 years. They were still, enriching above 2 to 3%. 2 to 3% is the only thing that is needed for the use of peaceful power production. And recently reported and continually reported Iran enriching at 60%, which is bordering on weapons grade. We all know that's exactly what they're intending on doing, is creating a nuclear weapon, which then they will deliver with their ballistic missile system that they've been allowed under the last agreement to just continue perfecting. So Iran can't be trusted. Frank, for the love of my goodness, they have sent or solicited assassins in the United States of America to kill John Bolton, Ambassador Bolton, National Security Advisor Bolton, and Secretary of State Pompeo. So
that's now.
These are the people we're
This
going
isn't
to
ancient
trust.
history. That's happening.
That's
as
now.
we
That's
speak.
happened. And speaking of now, Frank, Iran just launched missiles, 12 missiles out of Iran into Iraq towards our consulate in Erbil,
Yep.
and we said nothing. The Biden administration has said nothing while the negotiations are going on. That's like trying to have a negotiation with a person that's holding you down, got their arm around your neck, and is punching you in the face, and you're trying to negotiate with them.
Yeah.
And then finally, this absolutely must be a treaty. Section 2 of the Constitution, Article 2 of the Section 2 of the Constitution states that while the president can negotiate, the legislature must ratify by supermajority. The reason they don't want to do that, the reason the Biden administration doesn't want to do that, is because they know it will never pass,
Right.
because the American people see everything we've talked about and don't want any of this.
Yep.
And then finally, Frank, and just to add insult to injury, not only is Russia involved in the negotiation and helping Iran, but so is China. As a matter of fact, those missiles that landed in Erbil next to our consulate, they got advice and technical expertise from China to make them. China is right involved completely with Iran. As a matter of fact, the premier has been invited to Iran to meet with the mullahs. So this has strong connections to the worst of the worst in the world, and we absolutely can't be trusting any of this to go on. So,
The question is,
so Congress absolutely must speak with a very loud
I
voice.
couldn't agree with you more. I hope they will, and I hope that it will be dispositive. At the very least, they must object to this process, as you say. And Biden's predecessor, Barack Obama, got away with essentially blowing it past Congress. I hope that won't happen in this case, because it's an even worse deal, and it's even less likely to stop the Iranian ambitions. Let me just turn very quickly. You mentioned China there at the end, Congressman Scott Perry. We are looking at China uh, making very little secret that it intends to act aggressively in its own right against Taiwan, possibly against India, perhaps against both for that matter. Um, do you think that their takeaway from what they've seen so far with respect to Putin and his, well, murderous invasion of Ukraine is likely to translate into more of an incentive to act aggressively against Taiwan? Or do you think that they're actually now likely to pull back from the brink in their own right?
I think that China is absolutely watching what happens in Ukraine. Now, they might be assessing that the Russian army isn't everything it's meant to be or was purported to be, and they might feel themselves in a very good position as their new alliance with Russia. Russia showcasing its inability to move quickly through a nation state of Ukraine that should have really not been much of an obstacle for a first class world army. That having been said, what they're really watching is the response from the West. And of course, the United States in particular are now flying fighters into Taiwan's airspace and daring anybody to do anything about it. And of course, nothing's being done about it. And of course, Frank, recently they issued a statement that basically said anybody that thinks they're going to help Taiwan militarily is going to be considered an act of aggression against China. And of course, as you know, we do help Taiwan militarily. We have forces stationed close by. We sell them arms and equipment and advise them on expertise. And we do have a sorts of a gentleman agreement that we're not going to allow China to run the Taiwan Straits and subsume Taiwan. So I think this is a very critical, pivotal time. We would certainly lose a lot by allowing China to just walk into the doorstep, across the doorstep of Taiwan
Amen.
and take it over. But they're watching Russia right now in a very, very tepid response regarding Ukraine. And I think that definitely informed President Xi. Peace
Congressman,
was breaking all
we're
around
we're
all
we're
out around the world under Trump, but now look at the
we're out
chaos.
of time, Congressman. I couldn't agree with you more on that last
Yeah.
point. I think we've got more than a gentleman's agreement to try to defend the Taiwanese. I hope that we will be indicating lessons learned from the Ukraine experience, that we've got to deter the Russians and the Chinese now by especially making sure the Russians don't get away with murder. Thank you, Congressman. Come back to us again soon, if you will. Next up, we're going to talk about the home front with one of the great political operatives, George Racely, right after this.